Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for stopping by for this emergency podcast. We've already got a comment here from Connor. I know he's a Federer fan. We've got Isabel here. I've got Jack here, and of course, we're here to discuss the recently announced retirement of Roger Federer. We will get to see him one last time on a competitive court. Let's give the Laver Cup a competitive tag for this moment at least. We'll see him there in 10 days, but that will be the last time we see him in any kind of competitive action. I'll come to his statement in a minute. But first of all, Jack, are you surprised? How do you feel? What are your initial thoughts on this announcement?
I think I'm quite a good person to ask, John, because I'm not a huge Federer fan. That's the first thing I'd say. But as somebody who's impartial, I am still very saddened because Federer is more than tennis, right? He's as big as it gets. He is the personified version of the sport. So it hurts. It really hurts to see him have to, because he wouldn't want to have done it. He did everything in his power to get back on court. So it's really affecting me a little bit, I've got to say.
Yeah, I think I feel the same. I mean, funny enough, when him and sort of Nadal sort of first emerged, I probably had more inclinations towards Federer as a fan of somebody who was sort of grew up with Wimbledon and therefore would focus more on that. But anyway, we'll come to that a bit more in a second. I'll get your initial thoughts, Isabel, and then we'll come to his statement. Tell me what you thought when you heard the news, Isabel.
Well, I am kind of known as the Federer fan in our circle of tennis bloggers and stuff. I've started watching tennis because of Federer. Became a fan because when he won his first Grand Slam. I've been watching him, most of my life. I'm not surprised. I listened to his statement and everything he said makes sense, and I think we've all been waiting for it a little bit, but it still is very emotional.
Yeah.
And I don't feel good.
Oh, I'm sorry, and great that you're still free to come on and share your not good feelings with us here today. Listen, by the way, everybody, as you can see from my hair, as you can see from certainly you'll hear from my very little preparation for this presentation today. It's obviously all been a bit rushed, and other than the statement, which I'm going to share with you shortly, or in fact, pretty much now, nothing else has been thought through. But in a way, we've certainly had about 12, 18 months, arguably, to sort of prepare for this moment, and even perhaps 20 years of stuff to work on. So really, with Federer, fortunately, there doesn't need to be a huge amount of preparation. I'll come to his statement now, and then we will, come back and have a chat about other things, if you like, or certainly about Federer in a grander scale. So of all the gifts that tennis has given me, and by the way, he did this in an audio on Twitter along with the statement itself, which I think was quite a cool way to announce this retirement. Anyway, and he says basically, and as soon as I saw it, as soon as I got the notification, as soon as I saw it, and as soon as I heard the first few words, I thought, okay, here we go. Anyway, of all the gifts that tennis has given me over the years, the greatest, without a doubt, has been the people I've met along the way, my friends, my competitors, and most of all, the fans who give the sport its life. Today, I want to share with you all, as many of you know, the past 3 years have presented me with challenges in the form of injuries and surgeries. I've worked hard to return to full competitive form, but I also know my body's capacities and limits, and it's my message. Its message to me lately has been clear. I'm 41 years old. I've played more than 1,500 competitive matches over 24 years. Tennis has treated me more generously than I would ever have dreamt, and now I must recognize it is time to end my competitive career. I would like to especially thank my amazing wife, Mirka, who has lived through every minute with me. She has warmed me up before finals, watched countless matches, even while over 8 months pregnant, and has endured my goofy side on the road. And I've got the goofy mug, as it turns out, because he is a bit goofy sometimes, and I think that's one of the reasons why we all like him. I also want to thank my 4 wonderful children for supporting me, always eager, etc., etc. I know he mentions the Laver Cup, so I just want to maybe skip to that part of it. Anyway, I want to thank my loyal sponsors, blah, 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 blah. There's a lot to read here. Not all of it is, by the way, worthy. I just don't want to get bogged down in it. But he does go on to say that the Laver Cup will be his last competitive. Here we go. The Laver Cup next week in London will be my final ATP event. I will play more tennis in the future, of course, but just not in Grand Slams or on the tour. So I think we all kind of know what that means. We will see him around, maybe in a coaching capacity, maybe as a broadcaster, maybe even on the court in the seniors tour or some sort of fun environment. But the Laver Cup, which will be not this coming weekend, but the following weekend, will be his last event. Jack, any thoughts on the retirement wording or the statement?
None of it's really much of a surprise, to be honest. I think when we see something a little bit more personal, I guess, that'll be a bit more insightful. I mean, a lot of that is pretty bog standard, Federer publicity stuff, basically just a lot of thank yous, a lot of, just nods to the fact that he tried his best to get back and stuff. It not too much of a surprising statement. I'm really looking forward to him sort of sitting down and having a one-on-one with somebody to find out a little bit more.
Maybe us, Jack.
Maybe us. Yeah, maybe us.
I mean, I'm disappointed he didn't let us know before he even put the statement out, if I'm honest. But yeah, okay. So let's wind back a little bit. He's won 20 Grand Slams, etc. And let's just have a quick thought about the last 18 months or so, possibly even a bit longer. I would say from the Australian Open of 2020, just before the pandemic hit. And I think he struggled through that tournament in many respects. I think he went into that semi-final against Djokovic that year. He'd had lots of sort of 5-setters against Tennis Sangren and,
of course,
and John Millman and faced
great,
yeah, exactly. And it was a great run, despite the fact obviously it ended in the semis. But I think his performance in that semi-final did suggest, and even going into that semi-final, I remember thinking there was some sort of stories about maybe he wouldn't take the court. But oh, by the way, this brings me to something else. He's never, and therefore will never, have retired during a match.
Yeah, it's insanely impressive. That is, I mean, it's mad. It's not even real. Sure,
I mean, because it's not real. I mean, that was bearing in mind, by the way, we've just seen somebody walk off the court 2 points before match point when she played Emma Raducanu. I can't remember who that was, but
Ystremska,
and she's got some form. I don't know the exact details, so I won't go into too much more. But we have seen, let's say it's happened in the past, I'm sure, where players have walked off court and they probably could have completed the match. He has never left the court injured during a match. So go on.
I was going to say he should have. He should have in his last professional match, right? The one against Hurkacz at Wimbledon. And he kept going and took the 5th bagel of his career.
Yeah, but perhaps he didn't, want to upset this unblemished record, so to speak. What are your thoughts, Isabel, on the statement and some of the things he said, and even the last couple of years?
I mean, everything he said is all, pretty standard. Thank yous and such. It doesn't necessarily mean much to me, his words. It's just the action really that's upsetting me. Yeah, I mean, I think after that incredible run he had in 2017. He never really had that momentum again, which is quite sad. And everything was such a difficult for him afterwards. But I like to think that those 2 tournaments that he won in 2017 are kind of I wanted him to retire after he won Wimbledon,
Okay.
in 2017 because I was just like, there's no way you can win this again.
I think it was 2017, 2018, those 2 years he was still competitive, but I know exactly
Yeah.
what you mean. I mean, the year is
Yeah.
almost irrelevant.
He could have won in 2019 for sure.
Well,
Look, I
yeah,
can't,
that
there's
was a
only
painful
so
one.
much that I can take today. I can't take talking about the 2019 Wimbledon final.
I
Sorry.
think we may keep that now. That's the last we will mention of it during this particular podcast. Perhaps it will return as and when Djokovic retires. But listen, yeah. So just the last couple of years, and in a way, I think some people may have speculated in the last year or so that he may well return, and perhaps there were sort of 2 or 3 different scenarios. I think one of the most popular was that he would do Laver Cup and potentially Basel and potentially Wimbledon next year. I found that with every day that he was away from the court, that possibility became less and less likely. Just because in sport, when it goes beyond a year, and it goes for some of the people that have been out of action, in tennis in recent years, if you like, not just Roger Federer. When you're out of action for more than a year, it's a landmark moment for me in any sport. When it becomes 18 months, let's say, and you haven't hit a ball in competitive action, it's even more significant. And then, of course, you add the fact that is he 41 now, or has he just turned 41, or going to turn 41?
He's
I know
41.
Just turned 41, yeah.
just turned. I noticed he mentioned 41 in the statement, but I couldn't remember if he said I'm approaching my 41st or I've just turned. So when you add those factors together, I think that became less and less likely. And what for me is also clear is that he doesn't really want to do probably a Juan Martín del Potro style sad farewell, which it could be if he was playing a singles competitive match, say at Basel, or even more so at Wimbledon. And that's not what he wanted. He wouldn't want to lose, he wouldn't want to be gifted a couple of games in a third set just for whatever's sake, Jack?
Oh, it's interesting because the Laver Cup obviously is, it's meant to be a competitive match, right? But I can't see anybody coming out and tearing Federer a new one basically on the court. I really
Andy
don't see it
Murray. Andy
happening.
Murray's going to be there, of course.
That's
They'll all just
He won't be on
respectfully sit
They'll be on
down.
the same side.
There's surely, it's got to go to a tiebreak at least, right? Even if you're going to beat him. So I'm sure he'll go out, not like Del Potro, where it was like 4 games or something he won, and it was all a little bit deflating, wasn't it? That
It was lots of drop shots as well. Was it Del Bonis or
Del Bonis? Yeah, it was Del
yeah.
Bonis.
Well, I don't think
harsh.
I don't think it'll be like Del Potro's at all, even, I mean, regardless of whether or not he plays well at the Laver Cup, because Del Potro just had a very different career, and his whole career was quite sad to begin with. So a retirement felt quite different, whereas Federer's just, Federer. So it's very different.
That's true. I actually, interestingly, if you guys are keen to do this, I wrote an article like a year ago, and it's just been released for a publication. So I'm reading this with fresh eyes, basically, and it's basically a chronology of the best achievements of Federer's career. So at some point I'm quite happy to go over some of the best ones, because for example, looking all the way back to 2001 when he beat Sampras for the first time, you can't have a video like this and not mention stuff like that.
Absolutely.
I feel. Yeah,
absolutely. In fact, I just want to sort of talk about the last couple of years, and then I was going to wind back.
Yeah.
We won't go into every single one of those 1,500 matches, but I certainly think we can touch upon the what do we call it? The turning points, but the landmarks.
Yeah.
And the first one, and maybe the biggest one in his professional career at least, was that Sampras win at Wimbledon, Jack.
Yeah, I didn't see that one. I'll be honest. I think it was.
No, we don't need to give an analysis of the match as much. You're aware of the landmark moment.
Yeah, I won't give you my age when at that match, but I didn't see it live or anything.
I was probably watching, but I don't remember.
Yeah, great. That definitely was his sort of breakthrough. I mean, he won his first title previous to that in Milan. I guess he wasn't a total unknown, I suppose, but obviously getting to the 4th round of Wimbledon full stop is a big deal. So it wasn't like first round for Sampras and gets knocked out. It went 5 sets. It was extremely close. I think Sampras also was 4-time reigning champion. So it was a huge deal. It wasn't totally out of the blue, but probably Federer's biggest win, I would say, up to that point.
5 sets, and you see him go to the floor in a actually almost as, and this is not a disrespectful thing or a criticism, almost as if he's won Wimbledon, because the respect that, and in fact, I know Connor mentioned it earlier, the respect that he had for competitors and the sport as a whole, certainly stood him apart. And the reverence with which he obviously held Sampras in, at that point, bearing in mind, obviously, Federer hadn't won a major at this point. In fact, he didn't even go on to win that year. I think many people who, including myself, can sometimes get confused and think, oh, maybe that was the year he first broke through at Wimbledon and went on to win it. But actually, it was 2 years later when he came back to win it. He did have a reputation, of course, as a teenager, as being a bit volatile, believe it or not, considering how completely different he was, really, from probably 2001 onwards, in that he generally kept his emotions in check. But as a teenager, he was sort of regarded as being pretty volatile. There is, of course, as well, a coach that he had in his teens, a guy from South Africa. Jack, do you know his name? But you know who I'm referring to?
No,
it was a coach he had in his teens, and I'll look it up when I stop talking, basically, or even I'll do it as I do so. He had a South African coach who he gets very emotional about when he talks about him, because unfortunately he passed away in a car accident. Maybe someone in the live chat knows that person's name as well. And
is it
really,
Peter? Oh no, it's not him. Never.
Yeah,
go on.
Federer
Never
coach. And I'm just checking it now. Carter, the surname was Carter. That's right. Yeah, Peter Carter.
Australian, I think.
Australian, yeah. Anyway, he had a big influence on Roger as a kid, as a teenager, and Roger still fondly talks about him to this day as being an extremely influential person on his career. Sadly, Carter didn't get to see the successes that Roger would go on to have. Antonio there, thanks for joining us as well. That was a gentleman on the court, and really that was very different, though, to how he was as a teen, when he would smash rackets down and all the rest of it. Can you see that side of Federer, Isabel, when you hear about these stories of him smashing rackets and getting angry with everyone?
It's hard to picture. I remember watching, I think it was the 2014 US Open quarterfinal with him and Gael Monfils.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a point that he lost and he was standing at the net. And I remember I saw him like kind of hit his racket against the net, and I went, oh my God, Federer got angry. Wow, I've never seen that before. That was the only time up until that point that I had seen him display some sort of emotion, and then I found out about like his prior teenage years.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's something that I think a lot of male teenage players deal with, and apparently still deal with,
Mm-hmm.
well into their 20s. And I think it would be really lovely if some of the players on the tour right now could kind of look at Federer in this moment and be like, yeah, it might be better to sort of personify him now going forward with their careers.
I think Carlos Alcaraz, by the way, speaks to us all. He's just tweeted an emoji of a broken heart. And I think that's it. At least that's all I saw on the notification. I actually have Alcaraz on Twitter notifications just because his tweets are so interesting and amusing and even insightful. Even that broken heart, I think, tells us a lot about the reverence with which Federer, of course, is held, and also Alcaraz himself, who I think even spoke recently about his wish to at least play Federer at some point. Well, unfortunately, that won't be occurring in a competitive environment, at least. So we had that landmark win against Sampras that really made him known, if you like, and it was a turning point. He went on to win his first Wimbledon 2 years later, and of course that began a run of, I think, 6 in a row at Wimbledon. 03, 04, 05,
5,
06,
I think.
07, 5 in a row. You're right. Yeah, because of course that was broken by Nadal in that epic match in 2008. So let's just touch on that. I mean, 5 in a row at Wimbledon, Jack, which is just, I mean, we've got someone else, Djokovic, obviously on the precipice of that. At the moment, I think he's won 4 in a row, 18,
Yeah, that's
19,
true.
20. So, but it is insane to win that many and be unbeaten for that long at Wimbledon.
You got to realize Federer was even, I would say, probably a step above how much better Djokovic is than everybody else on grass, because it wasn't just Wimbledon he was winning. He was winning Halle, he was winning Stuttgart when he went there. It got to the point where he'd won 65 consecutive matches on grass by the time he was playing in Nadal in that 2008 final. So he was untouchable on the surface. And I mean, I was doing, when we had that stat about Alcaraz, the most physical slam of all time, basically, I looked at the last 20 years to see what the least physical slams of that period was. And it was like 2006, Federer, 1 hour, 47-minute average court time for all 7 matches. 2004, Federer, like it would clean up constantly. It was like under 2 hour matches just all the time. He was great, honestly. And we'll never see a better grass court player, in my opinion.
No.
I would agree.
I mean, listen, I was thinking about this as I was preparing my coffee as well. He led the Grand Slam race for a significant period of time. Let's say he overtook, I think, Sampras maybe when he beat Roddick in that final, maybe sometime around 2009, 2010. And of course, he led it on his own, at least for about the next decade. I think it was Rafa then equaling it with his 20th at Roland Garros. And I think that's significant. I think, who ends up, whether, we know Sampras is not going to win the Grand Slam race. Okay. We know now that Roger Federer isn't going to win the Grand Slam race. But I think as long as you lead, I mean, someone's always, I mean, even right now, obviously Rafa's in the lead and maybe Djokovic will go on to take that lead. Someone one day in the future, whether that be 10 years or 100 years from now, will, believe it or not, overtake them. And so the fact that you just have it, I think, is significant enough. And I felt that the same. I've got, I'm a Nadal fan, and I just thought once he took the lead in Australia, I thought it's not perfect, but it's almost enough. And also, Connor here, by the way, we're gonna mention. I know you mentioned the U.S. Open, 4 or 5 wins. I think 5 wins in a row there, and also the French Open win in 2009. We are going to come to that in a second because they are also landmark moments in his career. But I just want to finish the Wimbledon element, at least, by a comment he gave after the 2008 Wimbledon final, which many people regard as the greatest tennis match of all time. Again, that may well get overtaken, but let's at least give it that honor for today. The final against Nadal, Federer loses it in 5 sets. It's an epic match for all different reasons. Check out what's the book that John Wertheim wrote, and it's also a documentary, Strokes of Genius. Check out that documentary; it's amazing. And just like we saw with Sinner and Alcaraz recently, it takes 2 to tango, and Federer, despite losing the match, plays obviously a 50% role, if you like, in terms of the protagonist. And he's interviewed by McEnroe afterwards. McEnroe says to him, "Listen, I don't know if this helps you at all, but you've just taken part in the greatest tennis match I've ever seen. And, does that help soothe the pain?" And Federer says, bearing in mind he's just fresh off the court, having lost that match, he said, "A little bit, it helps a little bit." And he also says, "Thanks, John," which I think is just 4 words in a way that are just amazing for me. Little bit and thanks, John. I think it's great of him to have that presence and clarity of mind after that obviously gut-wrenching defeat, which is his first in 65 odd matches, as Jack highlighted.
The other stat, of course, just worth mentioning before we move on from that, is that after that match he lost his number 1 spot, which is of course the record for consecutive weeks at number 1 at 237 consecutive weeks. Still a crazy record that who knows if it'll ever get broken.
Yeah,
I hope it doesn't.
Yeah. I mean, listen, this is the thing. I mean, these records do get broken. We just might not be alive to see it, but they do get broken, and that's just how it is. But I don't think it really affects almost at all Roger's position in the pantheon of greats. And when it is that close, by the way, as it is right now, 2021, 22, and perhaps Djokovic and Nadal will pull clear. But when it's that close, I think you can have barroom debates about which one of the three is the greatest, and you can give very different reasons for all three. We see it on Twitter with everyone, whoever they support, they put their narrative forward and they put their stats forward, if you like. But really, in the debate over and that really the slam race is objective, but every other debate really is so subjective that it almost becomes ridiculous. So we won't dwell on that too much. But I want to talk about some of the landmark moments. We talked about Wimbledon, that 2008 final. We need to move on because otherwise we could be here for weeks. Let's talk about the US Open, because it kind of precedes what occurred at the French Open in 2009. And we had that. Obviously, he's got a run at the US Open, 5 in a row there, and people can't even win 2 in a row, by the way, nowadays. And I don't think anyone's won 2 in a row since then. He won 5 US Opens in a row, Jack.
Yeah, incredible achievement again. Very similar to on grass, maybe the tiniest smidgen bit more vulnerable, but really still able to play crazy, offensive, aggressive tennis constantly. I think the one that comes to mind during that streak has got to be his final against Agassi, where Agassi was playing brilliant tennis, actually. It might have been 2006, I want to say. And Agassi lights it up for a set in the second set and probably couldn't have played any better. And he continues to play well for the third and fourth sets. But Federer is like, not only was he playing crazy, aggressive front foot tennis, when Agassi managed to get up on the point, sometimes Federer was like coming out with shots that it was that, the classic Federer adage that he just comes out with shots you've never seen before. And you're like, how on earth did he do that? Like that final in particular was the one that blew my mind.
I'm going to come to you in a second, Isabel, for a memory or a match that sticks out for you. But I'm going to dwell on a couple for me. I've actually seen him play twice, I think. I know it's definitely at least twice. I saw him, believe it or not, in 2006 play Tommy Haas in the Australian Open, a 5-set match that I was very much into for the first 2 sets. But once Federer took a 2-set lead, I decided that the wine had got the better of me, and I had a little snooze. The next thing I know, it's 2 sets all, and it's a match again. And but Federer prevailed and went on to win that tournament as well, like he did with so many times in Australia. I also saw a 2019 semi-final against Nadal, a 4-set victory as well. And I think it's amazing how he managed to turn that rivalry around, bearing in mind that there was long periods where Nadal was very much on top of that rivalry, particularly at slams. I think that's another feather in Roger's cap. And I think, Isabel, as well, you touched on it earlier about how he came back. He had a renaissance, if you like, in 2017, beginning of 2018, where he was competitive again and was winning majors again. I think that's another feather in his cap. If he needs any more feathers in his cap, I don't think he's got a cap large enough, to be honest with you. Isabel, what are your any particular moment or memory or point or match that sticks out for you?
I have some really great memories of that 2008 match, and where I was and who I was with at the time, and how utterly long the match was. But the moment that I have been thinking about for the last 20 minutes after figuring out, what was happening, when he won Wimbledon in 2017, it was pretty short match. I think it was straight sets. I think he didn't drop a set that entire tournament. So it wasn't a particularly grueling final. But I remember this moment at the end of the match. He was sitting on his bench and he looked over at his family sitting in his box, and all 4 of his kids were there, and he started weeping on court. And I don't know really why that is sticking with me, but when I saw that happen, I started weeping.
Yeah.
And my whole family was crying. And if I went back and watched it now, I would probably cry as well. But that, I know it has really little to do with his game or anything, but that moment really touched me and still does. And I think that it's a really lovely way to think about him at the end of his career.
Jack, this is, by the way, I think that's great. And listen, there's a million different memories that you can have. It could be an interview, it could be anything. And it's great that you've got this one that sticks out. Jack, by the way, just sharing a tweet.
I think Isabella will like this one, I think.
Great. Do you want to read it out, Jack? Go on.
Yeah, I was going to say you could put it on the screen, but yeah, no, it's quite
I've got
short,
to
I
read
guess.
it out.
It was just based on, because Isabel, I know, like that 2009 Wimbledon final, Andy Roddick's just posted on Twitter saying, seems like a good time to start training for Wembley. It was very funny.
I'm looking at right now, when you were talking about the 2005 US Open, I remembered this essay that everyone should read if they're a tennis writer, by David Foster Wallace, called Roger Federer is a religious experience. And he talks about that match against Agassi, and he says that match brings up what the world calls Federer moments.
Yeah.
So if anyone wants to relive his career, they should go read that article.
When you say sort of Federer moments, do you mean like what do you mean exactly?
I could quote him.
Go on.
Yeah. So almost anyone who loves tennis and follows the men's tour on television has, over the last few years, had what might be termed Federer moments. These are times as you watch the young Swiss play, when the jaw drops, eyes protrude, and sounds are made that bring spouses in from other rooms to see if you're okay. But he wrote a lot about Federer in his early career. There's another essay called Both Flesh and Not, where he also terms Federer as the liquid whip. So really, really excellent things to go read if you want to relive Federer.
Just give us his name once more.
David Foster Wallace.
Nice. David Foster Wallace. I'll be sure to check out his work and make sure everybody tuning in does. Talking of people tuning in, we've got some people there sort of reminiscing about his return to form in 2017. I think he did the Sunshine Double that year, Jack, right? As well.
In 2017, yeah.
Bearing in mind that both him and Nadal, but him in particular, had missed large chunks of the previous year, and there were concerns, if you like, about his future. And thanks for joining us as well, Ashley, as well. Talking about his forehand, but also, of course, his recovery regarding Nadal was actually probably largely down to his backhand. In terms of, he actually said he thanks the tour for improving his backhand, because, of course, Nadal perhaps exposed that for a bit in the late 2000s. And now I think, talking of Nadal exposing certain things, I think it's important to talk about the French Open. He's had marvelous success, of course, in Australia, very similar to his success in the US. In probably even, I think he's won more Australians than he has in New York. Actually, I think he may have won 6.
He has 6 in Australia, 5 in the US.
But anyway, the French Open. Okay, I sit here today as a Rafa Nadal fan, and I am so pleased he won a French Open title. I am I've gone back and I've literally watched the highlights from that again recently, and including the match point. In fact, to be honest with you, you don't need to watch the highlights of the match necessarily. It's against Robin Soderling, I believe. But even just the championship point, it's enough to. I felt emotional watching that. In the last few months, I've seen that championship point, all the highlights, and I thought, I am so glad he won this, because we would, if he hadn't won that one French Open, we would be sat here with a 5-minute section of sadness, if you like, that he didn't quite manage to get that. And we'd be talking about how he kept running into Rafa Nadal. And of course, potentially he could have done that year, but Soderling managed to knock Rafa Nadal out on court. I think that also helps in a way. I know lots of people will say, oh, but he didn't play Rafa Nadal. Well, Rafa Nadal played that tournament and lost to a red-lining, red-hot Robin Soderling that day, who played the tennis match of his life. Go on, Jack.
There's so much I want to say about that run, because in a way he did still have to wrestle with Nadal, because I'm sure, did he not know already that Nadal was out of the tournament?
He did. He played the next day, I think, after Nadal goes out.
Yeah, and he played Tommy Haas, and
That's right.
He was down 2 sets maybe, and also like a break point. So like he may be feeling nerves, but then comes up with this crazy, the best forehand of his career. A lot of people have said the one that like saved, the career Grand Slam for him, and then goes on to win the match. Then it's like 5 sets against Delpo in the semi-final, and then a rematch with Soderling. Oh no, not a rematch. Soderling beat him the next year, of course. Sorry, but no, he gets Soderling in the final. It's like he's not going to make a mistake, of course. This guy's beating Nadal, but there's no way he's missing this chance. And yeah, it was great. Really, really good run. Probably one of the most defining of his career, I would say.
Yeah. I mean, that match you mentioned against Tommy Haas is actually one that had skipped me by or had slipped past me anyway, somehow or another. I wasn't really aware of that match. But once you sort of understand the context, I think Nadal had lost the previous day. And so now the guy that Federer had run into, I think for the previous three finals, 06, 07, 08, yeah, and lost to, and in 08 in a really bad way to, I think he won 4 games.
I think 05 as well, right? Or
Oh no, 05 was against Puerto. Nadal beat a guy called Puerto,
sorry, that's it.
South America. I think may have been Argentinian. But anyway, in 06, 07, 08 was Federer each time. And Federer sort of, I think the first 2 years seemed to get a bit closer. You know, I think at least one of them was 4 sets, maybe both. Then, of course, he just gets thrashed in the 08 final. And in fact, Federer does talk about the influence of that final in Roland Garros, because about 3 weeks later, they're playing the Wimbledon final. And he did say that he did take some trepidation into that final. And of course, he loses the first 2 sets in 08. But I digress. 09, now with Nadal going out, this guy that has constantly stood in his way and would also stand in his way again in the future, he's gone. And it's one of those sort of landmark moments, if you like, in Nadal's Roland Garros career that stand out just as much as all the 14 wins he's had there. And now the draw, there's never been a draw open up as much as that day did when he goes out to Söderling. So then the next day, as you mentioned, he's playing Tommy Haas, and the world is watching in a slightly different way, if you like. And so is probably Roger Federer, because he goes 2 sets to love down to Tommy Haas. You would never imagine it. I mean, Tommy Haas was a very good player, but not probably someone you would imagine that would go on to win the French Open. And so clearly that must have had an effect on him. But he managed to turn it around, as you say, 2 sets to love down, produces an unbelievable forehand that only Roger Federer can, if you like, at facing breakpoint. And as you say, some people have said that was the best forehand of his career, maybe certainly the most important, because, of course, he goes on to win that title, beating Söderling in the final. And I'm just so pleased he managed to do that, because otherwise we would be here having a slightly different conversation, and fortunately didn't. Unbelievable success in Australia, as we mentioned, winning his final title, his 6th title in 2018, as part of that resurgence that we've also touched upon. Anything I've missed, or I'm sure I've missed hundreds of things, but either Jack or Isabel, just feel free to just jump in.
What, from 2009 and previous, I guess?
Anything from the last 20 years.
Yeah, that Australian Open final was probably I think if you're talking about the context of the French Open and people thinking somehow, and obviously you look back on this and you're like, why would people say this? But people maybe thinking Federer was on the way out, the changing of the guard was going to happen. Could he win another slam with Nadal on the way? Obviously, this was back in 2009, so he had another 13 years of his career to go. But yeah,
there were clouds really for Federer from losing the 08 French Open final when he got beaten really badly, winning 4 games. Then obviously losing that mammoth match on his turf at Wimbledon, also to his greatest rival at the time. And then obviously 09, we saw him tearful, losing in 5 sets to Nadal in Australia, and it was tearful in defeat, which was like, oh, this is a bit different to being tearful in victory. So. But he comes back again, if you like. Probably the first comeback, if you like, of his career.
Yeah, I mean, he won 3 of the next 4 slams. Maybe, arguably, should have won the 2009 US Open as well, when 30 all or something at 5-4 in the second set. Delpo gets this crazy challenge, that contentious line call, and goes on to win the second set from a breakdown. And yeah, obviously Federer goes on to lose in 5 sets. So you could have argued if he'd won the second set, it would have been straight sets. Yeah, I mean, he was great that year. One of his best years, given the adversity he'd faced in Australia, and looking maybe like he was just a little bit too jaded to continue.
Listen, there's been some great tennis films and documentaries out recently, and I'm sure there's many others that have skipped me by as well. But I'm going to just mention again this Strokes of Genius documentary and book, because I was talking to a friend recently about this documentary. I said, you've got to see it if you can. And this is a friend of mine who's, he's a passing, probably even less than passing interest in tennis. So much so, he said, who won the 2008 Wimbledon final? Okay. And he said, oh, maybe you shouldn't tell me, before I watched this documentary, and I said, actually, I'm not going to tell you, but if you found out by accident before watching it, it really doesn't matter. It's such it's such a great documentary. B, it's such an epic match that, in a way, even knowing the ending, that's a tribute to the two protagonists, if you like, Nadal and Federer. It doesn't matter that much in the end. As a viewer, if you like, who wins, I'm sure it still matters to both the two players. But it really doesn't. And actually, just coming back to Federer on grass, I do remember there was a question earlier that I'd like to sort of at least touch upon, if not fully address, which is basically who do we consider the grass GOAT, Djokovic or Federer?
It's Federer. I'm not even having this debate. It's Federer. I'm not even like this. How is this even a question? It's Federer.
Jack?
Yeah, it's definitely Federer. Yeah. He's better at serving in general, better at front foot tennis, gets to the net a little bit easier than Djokovic. As the grass courts have slowed down, Djokovic is a little bit better than, I mean, they've not slowed down loads, but they definitely play more like a hard court nowadays. But yeah, either way, it's definitely Federer. He's better at offensive tennis than Djokovic for sure.
Not Andy Roddick then?
Close second.
This is a great comment, and I like, by the way, that Federer has obviously a very good friendship with Rafa Nadal, but I also like his friendship with Roddick, and I think I touched upon it recently on a show or channel or a podcast where I think they're having a chat, him and Roddick, and Roddick says something about, I think it's about his backhand, and Federer goes, "Oh, I never noticed. I never knew that you had a sort of this particular weakness that Roger had been exploiting for the previous decade." And Roddick laughs and yeah. Anyway, any final sort of additional thoughts on Federer, either what's to come or just in general regarding his career, Isabel?
I don't really know what he'll do next. I can't really envision him coaching. I just don't. He seems too big to be a coach.
Yeah,
or
too
to
naturally
be
talented, even.
Yeah, just too. He's too big for that. I can't imagine him being on somebody's team. He's got his management company. I imagine he'll do a lot on the business side of things. He might do a lot of mentoring for younger players, which I think he kind of already does. But I don't, and I know he said in his statement that he'll still play, but I also can't really see him on like the senior tour, and maybe that's just me refusing to believe that he's old, but I just don't really see it. I think he'll just kind of go away for a while, be a part of his family, show up like he did at Wimbledon and in a suit and wave, and then go back to Switzerland. So,
Jack?
I think we've missed maybe 10 odd years of his career and quite a lot of that.
We can keep going. By the way, I'm still happy for another 20 minutes. Whenever I say, listen, I think we're coming to an end, I then make another note that I want to touch upon. So feel free, Jack. I don't want to hold you two back. I might even go on myself if you do have to disappear. But go on, Jack.
No, I'll go on with a few points then, and you guys can chip in if it prompts anything. Yeah. Obviously, you've probably talked about his golden years quite a lot there, sort of 2003 to 2010, the start of 2010, I would say, when he won that Australian Open title. And then
I think that was about his, by the way, just at this juncture, sorry, Jack, and you said jump in, he'd won about 16 around about this time. So there are sort of two halves, if you like, the first 10 years and the second 10 years.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so four slams from the Australian Open in 2010 onwards. So yeah, it was the kind of the gatekeeping time, the changing of the guard, and during that time, obviously, as courts sort of started to slow down, as defensive tennis was rewarded more than offensive tennis, Nadal and Djokovic they really were ruling pretty much all the surfaces. But within sort of 2011 to 2016, I just wanted to pick up a few points that were particularly impressive. I think the first one for me, if we're talking about Federer on clay, and maybe people not realizing that he is one of the greatest clay court players of all time, Djokovic is on a 41-42 match win streak or whatever it was. Semi-finals of the French Open. Nobody picks Federer to win. and he comes out and plays one of the best clay court matches of his career to get to the
Mm-hmm.
final. That has got to be one of the crowning achievements for me, when Djokovic just looked untouchable. I mean, Nadal had lost to him like 3 times on clay or something over the past few months, and Federer comes out and plays incredible tennis. I don't know if you guys remember that one that much.
I don't remember it as it happened, but I'm aware of it since. But of course, is that 2011? Did you say?
Yeah, 2011.
Of course, he goes on to lose the final to Rafa, and probably that stuck in my mind more than that semi-final. But yeah, absolutely. And there's so many landmark moments, and I think really when it comes to tennis, and this is the note I sort of made at this particular juncture, was that the stats don't do it justice in terms of the influence and the effect that he had on the sport as a whole. But if I could put it in 4 words, if you like, rather than 20 majors or the hundreds of masters and 1,500 matches that he played, it would be in 4 words. And it would be, took the breath away. And that's something that no matter how many slams you've won, and I'm not going to talk about other major winners, but there are some players that won multiple majors, but they never quite took the breath away. And Roger Federer, on many occasions, took the breath away. I've also seen, by the way, people talking about, we obviously talked about passing the guard or the changing of the guard. Obviously, when Federer came and sort of, Sampras sort of left the sport, if you like. We obviously got Federer leaving the sport, and we've got a young guy right now who's on the tour, a Spaniard, who is taking the breath away as well. And I think these 4 words mean kind of more than, for me, as a tennis purist, if you like, or just a tennis fan, than anything else. And there's, you could just watch a game, if you like, a random game from his career, and almost certainly he would take the breath away. By the way, as we've got an Andy Murray fan on, maybe we should talk about that game that they had that was like 16 minutes at Wimbledon, Jack.
Yeah, the one on YouTube, it's like the greatest game ever or something. Yeah, I think Andy lost that one actually, so I'd shut it out a bit. And that semi-final was brutal, by the way. That was like, Andy was playing great. He was like amazing from start to finish of that tournament. And then Federer has like the best serving day he's ever had in his life. I don't think Andy came close to winning a set despite that game. It was brutal to watch, because Federer then came out the next day and played Djokovic, kind of undercooked. And I think he lost in 4 sets, and only very, very almost lost that second set as well. You only just got it. So yeah, it was kind of, I don't know why it couldn't have been the other way around. Andy in the final against an undercooked Federer. So it kind of just hurts that one.
Yeah. Isabel, obviously you're from sort of the US or Canada. I sometimes forget which one. I think you grew up in the US but spent some of your time in Canada. Am I right on that?
No, but it's fine.
Okay. Let's go for North America, if you don't mind.
Yeah, North America.
Branding 2 countries as one continent, if you like. What was the thoughts about Federer there? He seems to be pretty popular in New York, at least.
Yeah, I can't speak on a national level to him in his early years, because I was only 6 when I started watching tennis. But from what I know, Federer was one of, I think, the few like international or like European athletes that had the US like infatuated with him. There were very few, until I think Rafa came along. I think there was really no debate amongst like US people. Everybody loved Federer. Like, you couldn't find anybody who hated him. And I think that just spoke to the way that he played. Nobody was really mad when he beat Sampras. Nobody really, minded when he beat Agassi, and was just, kicking all these Americans to the curb. America and Canada, just, they love him.
Yeah.
Huge fans. Something I was thinking about when you were saying that he just took your breath away, which is totally true. I think one of the reasons that I, fell in love with his game was just he seemed to love playing more than winning or dominating. he really just seemed to enjoy playing the actual game of tennis more than other people at the time, and maybe more than some now. And I think that really made a difference in watching. And I, as someone who doesn't necessarily play, I can't really speak to the physicality of that. Maybe you could, Jack, but I feel like that really made a difference when I watch some of the other, big three. I really feel how hard they want this title, this thing, this money, this trophy. But when I watch Federer, I never felt that way. I always just felt like, oh, he just loves playing. There was an article a long time ago, I think it was in 2017 after that run of his, where they interviewed him, and the journalist said something like, he just really likes the feeling of the ball on the strings.
My comment on that would be, I definitely think he likes winning just as much as the other two.
Oh, of course he does.
Yeah, but it's how he makes it look, right? So it's just so easy for him. It's not an effort. It's so elegant. There's no he doesn't drop a bead of sweat from his brow. It's just like he'll walk off the court and be immaculate, basically. Porcelain figure. He just makes it look easy, I think, but he definitely wants to win.
Well, of course, I wasn't saying he doesn't, but that was never the forefront of my mind watching him.
Yeah.
I know exactly what you mean, Isabel, in terms of the effortless nature of it. But there's no doubt that there's, obviously as much determination to be successful as with the other two we just mentioned. Jack, I'm not going to get bogged down in the GOAT debate or the big three in terms of how some people like to get bogged down, but I do think it's impossible not to mention the other two protagonists in this story of Rogers. And what do you think to the argument that suggests that they've all made each other better and they've all prolonged their careers because they've all been around?
Yeah, I'd definitely say Federer molded Djokovic and Nadal's style of play, and it took a long time for Federer to be able to respond to that, I would say, in the latter stage of his career. I think after becoming number one in 2012, there was a spell from like 13, 14, 15, 16 where Federer was really struggling to win matches against these guys in big tournaments. And obviously, he won in 2012 at Wimbledon, but didn't win another slam until the start of 2017 when he won in Australia. And it was because of Djokovic in particular and hard courts.
How many years is that? Sorry, he went without winning a slam?
4.5.
4.5. That's pretty. That's a long time.
Yeah. Well, it felt like that he was done basically after 2013. When he lost to Stakhovsky in Wimbledon. I think a lot of people were saying the end of days. Basically, that, by the way, ended a streak of like 36. Have I got it in front of me? 36 consecutive Grand Slam quarterfinals, which is that's 9 years, obviously, of making quarterfinals at every single slam without missing a slam either. That is very difficult to relay how tough that is. I would say that is probably maybe the stat of his career, because that is like this, but that's the stat to highlight his consistency, I would say, and just how unrivaled it is, because that is mental. 36 consecutive Grand Slam quarterfinals.
What would you say is the sort of most remarkable win of his career? I guess the French Open final, we touched on it. I think, and I'd like to think about the wins. Of course, probably the most remarkable match ended up in defeat, that 2008 final. But thinking of the wins, I'm thinking French Open final. I'm thinking Wimbledon final just a few weeks later against Roddick. His final of 5 is his 5th one in a row. Bearing in mind there was a 5th set, and what was it? I don't know, 16-14 in the 5th set.
Yeah.
Those two remarkable wins. I mean, I know his first Wimbledon, his first major is obviously significant, but he won it in straight sets. So probably in terms of the tennis doesn't stick out as much. What other matches for you? I mean, the 2017.
Yeah,
we talked about the Renaissance, that final against Nadal. I think in terms of quality, it didn't quite hit the heights of the 2008 final in particular. But still, in terms of rolling back the years, and none of us thought we'd ever see, because Nadal was in the midst of a spell way off the top of the game, albeit a bit less than Federer's had been. that 2017 as well final is one that we should touch upon.
Yeah, if you're talking about remarkable, that's probably the most unexpected slam win of Federer's career, and the whole tournament was remarkable. I think it might have been the first time anybody had beaten 4 top 10 players en route, right? And he played 4 or 5 set matches. Well, I think he had to play Nishikori, he had to play Wawrinka, he had to play Nadal. Maybe it was just 3 5-setters, I don't know. But yeah, it was mind-boggling from number 17 in the world as well. Just totally, I think it was like 40-1 at the start of the tournament or something like that. Unreal run. For me, that's Federer's crowning achievement, I would say, to come back after 4.5 years of not winning a slam and then make that run at the Australian Open.
I think I would agree with that. Yeah. Well, I just with the year as a whole, combining, the Wimbledon and Australia, but I think Australia definitely was a harder tournament, more difficult to get through. And I don't know if that match was any, not like less than the 2008 final. I was pretty sure Federer didn't have it when he was 2 sets down. I actually went to bed and was like, I can't watch him lose.
You mean 2008? I think in
2017.
2017 was a breakdown of the fifth for sure.
Yeah. And it had been too much emotions the entire night, so I was like, I can't do it. And then I woke up the next day and he had won.
Yeah, I mean, listen, he also says there's so many quotes, and there's another one he gives in his speech afterwards, just really touching. And he turns and looks at Rafa, and probably with a thought of, I remember 2008, you bastard. But in a nice way, when you call your mate a bastard. And he's like, if I could share it though, then call it a draw. We don't have draws or ties in tennis, but if we could have had a tie today, I would have been happy to do that. Which kind of melts the heart for people that are fans of either player. Go on, Jack.
My favorite, just you were mentioning mates calling each other bastards. One of my favorite moments from that year in 2017 was when he won the final in Indian Wells, and Wawrinka's standing, he's watching Federer laughing, and he's like, he's laughing, he's an asshole, and Federer just laughs. Federer just laughs more. I think Stad had just talked about how he could never beat him. Basically, he was like, I think it was 21-3 head-to-head against Wawrinka. So
very good against someone who's won 3 majors and obviously left their mark on the sport as well. That 2017 final. There's sort of a second narrative of that 2017 tournament. There's the remarkable fact that he hadn't won a major for 4.5 years and really not looked like doing so, I would say. And then obviously having the injury at the end of 2016 and not looking like he was going to be making any kind of impression at all. And yet he gets all the way to the final. But there's a second turnaround as well in his career. And that's the Nadal rivalry. I touched on it earlier, which for the previous decade, really from that Wimbledon final in 2008 until this moment, certainly in the big matches, Nadal was winning them all, or certainly the large majority of them, not just on clay. And that's probably what would have hurt Federer and his fans the most, the fact that this clay court specialist had turned around the rivalry on other surfaces too. We saw obviously the 2009 final as well in Australia and many others. And yet here we were 8-9 years later, and he turned that rivalry around because, he won that final in 2017, but he also beat him as well quite comfortably, I think, a few weeks later in Indian Wells, I believe, or it might be in Miami. Certainly, both, exactly. So he now wins 3 times back-to-back in monumental matches of monumental importance, bearing the stage of the tournaments they were at Masters and, of course, at that major final. And I wasn't really nervous going into that 2017 final. I thought Rafa's got this, as Isabel probably thought as well, as you touched upon. But and in that 5th set, he goes to break up at Nadal, and I think, he's got this. But he didn't have it. And Roger turned that mini turnaround as well in that 5th set as well. And we all remember as well how he celebrates. Of course, there's a challenge from Rafa. It is close. You get the impression that it is going to be in, and therefore Roger's probably won, this 2017 Wimbledon Australian Open final. But we don't know. They look up, I can see Rafa now sort of shaking his head, shrugging his shoulders, thinking it could be out. And they look up the screen and it lands in. And Roger Federer does this sort of childlike jumping up and down on the bed celebration that he just can't believe it either. And yeah, Jack, any thoughts on what I've just said?
It's a great explanation of his celebration, because I remember it like pixel for pixel, the way he described it there. Yeah, it's just definitely for me, it was outstanding. That whole year as well, he won over like 90% of his matches. I think that was the 6th season he'd done that, winning over 90% of his matches. So that's more than anybody else in the Open era. So it was a huge deal. Just again, to come out and play a year like that. Arguably, I suppose you didn't have Novak on the scene, I suppose, but yeah, to turn around the rivalry with Nadal, I think that was the biggest takeaway from that year.
ATP finals too, by the way. We often talk about Nadal never winning it. Well, one of the main reasons for that is because I think Federer won it. How many times did he win the ATP finals?
Six
times, which I think is still the most, right?
It is, yeah. He was also the oldest guy to win it, and that might have changed now, I guess, but that would have been 2011. He was the oldest. Yeah, he still would be the oldest now, that's right. And I remember in that 2011, just FYI, that was the only event that Federer was able to beat Novak and Rafa back-to-back, and he did it in emphatic fashion.
Okay, nice. Also, his age and being a trendsetter, if you like, because he just said he's just turned 41 and he was still playing. I think he was 40 when he played Wimbledon last year. If he wasn't 40, he was so close to it. Jack, do you know his exact age when he played Wimbledon last year? When's his birthday?
August 8th, I think.
So he's probably 39, approaching his 40th. But so just a couple of months away from his 40th birthday, he's playing in a Grand Slam quarterfinal, and he's also threatening to win slams, and he's winning majors at 36, 37 as he did in 2017, 2018. This is unprecedented territory at the time. We may see it again in the future, and we're seeing something similar with Rafa and obviously Novak now. I think 35 and 36 respectively, and of course they're approaching their 37th birthday, if you like, or Rafa will turn 37 next year. But he was the first to do this, to be so successful, to be such a threat at that age. We've seen perhaps players like Verdasco as well in recent years playing, I think in his late 30s and perhaps even 40, Feliciano Lopez. But with all due respect to the two Spaniards I just mentioned, they were not quite threatening to win majors at those ages.
And actually, arguably, the only other person at that age that is achieving stuff quite significant. This is going to sound quite backwards, but John Isner's doing a lot at that age. I know from Isabel, but yeah, he's the other guy that comes to mind. But anyway, this isn't an Isner podcast. Yeah, this is
he's not a threat.
He's not a threat. No.
Also, Jack, the 4 words again took the breath away. John Isner doesn't quite fall into that.
No, I think that's fair enough. I don't even think he'll mind people saying that he's self-professed serve bot, isn't he? And yeah, Federer to do that at that age, it was in 2017 when he got that new racket, he was able to just hit his backhand a bit better. He looked even more aggressive than he'd been in previous years, particularly against Nadal. That really did take the breath away. I remember Indian Wells, a few backhand returns crunched down the line really come to mind when he had that, this sort of green and black zebra t-shirt. Do you know the one that's like his 27 outfit? 2017 outfit, I should
wore
say.
That for Indian Wells in Miami,
yeah. That's the one that comes to mind for me.
Yeah, but of course the elegance and the all white sort of Wimbledon. He speaks in such reverence for the tournament that possibly he has most fond memories from. I'm just going to get the Carlos Alcaraz tweet because I know this is about pretty much a podcast about the past, but it is also a bit about the present and perhaps even the future. I'm just going to show this on the screen, even if it is just one word and an emoji, because I think Carlos speaks for us all in this tweet that he's posted. I'm about to share it if I'm quick enough. Here we go. Yeah, Roger, you've broken our hearts, but you've also made them. What's the word I'm looking for? You've also created heartwarming memories from your 20 years on court, and we've still got this tournament next weekend. I think the doubles will be a lot of fun. Can you see him partnering anyone but Rafa, Isabel in the doubles next weekend?
I don't know who else is on the team, but
Andy Murray and so a couple of half decent players. They found a couple of club players. Andy Murray and Rafa Nadal will be sort of bit part players. And
Yeah,
Djokovic.
Ruud as well sits past too.
I imagine
Well,
that.
okay.
Yeah, I imagine that they'll do it for the fans. Yeah,
They gotta.
yeah.
Surely one
There's
last rodeo.
there's no greater romance in sport than that of Roger and Rafa. So yeah, they'll do it for the fans.
Definitely. If there's this just occurred to me as well. As I saw a Federer video just out the corner of my eye there. If there's one silver lining in this retirement, is that there's going to be Federer like highlights all over Twitter, and I'm gonna I've not seen Federer highlights in a while, so I'm kind of looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Oh, I do. Yeah. I watch them whenever I'm sad.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, so I guess Novak and Andy may well be a partnership in the doubles too. Who's on the rest of the world team? Do we know?
Yeah, Felix is there. I think Schwartzman's there too.
Tiafoe, I think.
Yep, Tiafoe is playing. Yeah.
Oh, great.
That's the only ones that come to mind.
Has Tiafoe played Roger Federer?
Maybe.
No, I don't think they have.
He has. They played at They played at the US Open and it was 5 sets.
Oh, okay.
It's Federer.
Yeah, Kyrgios is not there, right?
No, he's not.
No.
Good.
So listen, Kyrgios is very rarely respectful about many players, but he does save some. Oh, Andy Murray, I know, Jack. He saves some respect for him, but he also has a lot of respect for Roger, and he's very gushing in his praise.
Some Federer Kyrgios matches do come to mind, to be fair. I think I remember one in Madrid, and there was a Federer quote along the lines of, "We need a clown for this circus," I'm pretty sure. So,
yeah. I mean, but he means that in the nicest possible way, right? I mean, he just means that, no?
No, I don't think so. I genuinely think he was. I think he was quite pissed off during the match, to be honest.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah, Federer, okay. I mean, yeah. So yeah, there's maybe a little bit, but you know, Kyrgios has got beef with everybody on court, I guess. So off the court, I'm sure he's got tons of respect for him.
All right, let's wrap this up now. Just some final, I promise now, thoughts, because I think we should all get away and get the highlight reel of Roger Federer out to help us soothe the pain, but maybe also make us a little tearful. But final thoughts. I'll come to you first, Jack, then I'll do Isabel, and then I'll be greedy and take the last couple of words.
Yeah, overall, do you know, we knew it was coming, I suppose. He was never coming back to win Wimbledon, so we've been prepped for a little while. It's obviously still incredibly, it's sort of deeper than, it's a massive loss for tennis in general. So there's genuine mourning going to be going on as I scroll through Federer highlights.
Yeah. Isabel?
I think I'm going to try to not feel like I'm grieving, since he's been gone for a fair bit. And as long as I don't think about 2019, then it'll be okay. But I'm just really grateful that I got into the sport because of someone so cool, and that I got to see, you know, his whole career and watch the sport change, and you know, he changed my life. So I'm just really grateful for that.
Yeah. Nice to hear from Ghost. I'll have his words up on the screen as well. Yeah, he will be missed. We mentioned the highlights, we mentioned the wins, we mentioned the majors and the Masters and the ATP Tour finals and the wins and some of the losses too. But he transcends the sport in so many ways. It was only yesterday, I think, for some bizarre reason, I decided to dip into the Bear Grylls documentary with Roger Federer.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, and he's funny, he's charming, he's goofy as well as you know. He's got that sort of 10-year-old laugh that just sort of makes him so warming as well. Considering all the maturity he showed on the court over the last 20 years, it just makes him even more endearing. And maybe endearing is another word we can add, but I think I will just finish with those 4 words that I touched upon earlier. Roger Federer, you took the breath away. Thanks for stopping by, Tennis World.
Thank you.